I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling. But out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Outside the Therapy Room. We are joined by Destinee today. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. It's always so fun when you're here. Today we are talking about rest. Some people it's hard to rest. For some people it's quite easy, or it's kind of in between. How are you with rest?
Rest has definitely been like a constant evolution for me of knowing or thinking specifically about what rest meant and how it looked like one specific thing. And it's only a bit more recently, like I would say over the past few months, I learned more that there's actually different ways to engage in rest. But more recently, I find that physical rest has been the main thing I've gravitated towards more so of just needing to nap a bit more, just as with being pregnant and the body just needing more time to adapt. And so, definitely been a new journey going into it and finding new ways to help engage in rest. It's been really nice and helpful to find those things because I've noticed a change in my overall well-being by tapping into various different types of rest.
Yeah, well, rest is so important for us. Just like I love the analogy of using a phone. When your phone is being used too much and you have too many tabs open or too many apps open, it's going to kill your battery a little bit faster. And what do we do with our phone when we need to do that? We let it take a break by charging. And it's the same thing with us humans. We can get drained, our battery can run out, and we need to find things that will recharge us. And a lot of the times it's rest. And I will say with you, like talking about physical rest, I feel like physical rest is quite an easy concept to consider. And that's usually the first one people go to when they think about rest. They're like, I lay down and I rest and I watch a movie at the end of the day. And that's my physical rest because I'm not doing anything. But a lot of the times there's more complexities within that because we can get up from that physical rest and still not feel well rested. And I think for me, I am really good at physically resting. I will note it down. I will communicate that with my family, being like, my body needs a little bit of a break. But I find it hard to have that mental rest because sometimes while I'm sitting there and I'm watching a movie, my body's physically resting, but my brain is planning the rest of the day, planning what are we going to have for dinner, what's in the fridge, what groceries do I need to get, what do I need to do for work, who do I need to reply back to, like all of these other things. And so, the rest, I guess at the end of the physical rest, I don't end up leaving fully well rested because I was still doing the mental gymnastics of figuring out tasks and goals. And so not really getting all that rest.
Yeah, it's like one part of you is resting. There's other parts of you that are still active and engaging, which makes it really hard for that overall feeling of feeling recharged. Where I know even too, like it's like I might get 8-9 hours of sleep at night, but if I am having issues trying to fall asleep and wake up in the middle of the night with those anxious thoughts and whatnot, waking up even after having gone a lot of hours of sleep, I can still feel pretty exhausted and depleted. And so I think there's like this concept of, well, if I'm just physically resting, that should be enough. At the end of a workday, coming home and just sit on the couch and binging, 6 episodes of a TV show. It's knowing that there is, to a degree, some good passive rest where we're sitting, we're not engaging, napping, resting, being still. But then we get to the point of rotting, where now as physically sitting there, is this actually still recharging me or is there something else that I need? And kind of playing around with rest. Yeah, we have that passive, but then we also have that active, where it seems a little off, but to actually engage in light stretching or yoga, or like even having massages, those can actually be a really good way of still resting physically with a bit of movement.
Yeah, well, as we're getting into it, then maybe we can talk a little bit about the 7 different types of rest. I think, like we mentioned, a lot of the time the focus is on the physical resting. and then some people might know the 7 different types of rest, or this may be brand new information that people are getting, that there are 7 different types of rest. So we spoke a little bit about physical resting. And so physical resting is where you are resting your body. And as you mentioned, sometimes with physical resting, it can also include a light exercise, stretching, yoga, something that's like kind of restorative in our physical need. Is there anything else that you kind of want to chat about when it comes to physical rest?
Yeah, I think it's the most common type of rest that I think people have heard of and know about. I know for me growing up, that was like the main thing. Like even like having like taking days off, like even mental health days, and it's like I feel like I should only be lying here doing nothing. When in actuality, that's not what we always need. So it's been nice to learn there's actually different types. There's 7 different types, and that physical is one way, which can be really good. But yeah, I think we described it well. Of like there's those different the passive versus active in that way. And it was really neat to learn more about the different other types of rest.
Yeah, and you also touched on something that it's included in physical rest, which is the quality of sleep. And so sleeping, yes, is a form of physical rest. Doing anything to relax your muscles, gentle movement, all of those things is going to be helpful and restorative. And so outside of physical rest, because we are already more familiar with the physical rest, there's also mental rest that I mentioned. Like I said, physically, my body is resting. Mentally, I'm all over the place. I am planning things in my head, and it can be quite overwhelming sometimes. And so what's another example of mental rest?
I think it's a lot of that cognition of spending a lot of times in your head. This can look like concentrating, focusing, overthinking, overanalyzing, a lot of that living in our brain, in our head, which for a lot of folks, like you said, like it can come up when we're trying to engage in other areas of rest. So when we're trying to enjoy a TV show, when we're trying to fall asleep at night, sometimes our brain is like, oh, okay, I'm now awake and I'm ready to work, which is the opposite of what we need in that recharge. And so, yeah, I find just when you feel like you're stuck in your head, that's when we might realize that I need to have a break. I need to slow down mentally. And some different ways that we can like engage in that can be taking breaks. So like throughout the workday or throughout our day, taking some time to like take a break from mentally checking in. And this can be doing some grounding exercises, which is my personal favorite, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I love that one.
Mindful of what's going on in our environment. But also journaling can be a great way of externalizing some of those thoughts and putting them to pen and paper. Because I'm old school. I like to write stuff out.
Same.
And that can be really helpful where they don't feel like they're trapped in my brain. And once they're externalized, there's a bit of that liberation and peace from it where my brain can be like, okay, you acknowledged me, we're good now. Those are 2 of the main things that I like in terms of that kind of mental rest.
I really do. I'm also a sticky note, or now with like phones, setting alarms and reminders, because I've noticed that a lot of my mental work that's happening in my brain is I'm trying to process the information that I am needing around my home or around like whatever the thing could be. And I'm creating tasks for them. And like, how much food do I have in the fridge? What do I need to add to groceries? And a lot of this is lists or reminders that I'm needing. And mentally, my brain is like, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. And so really grabbing it old school with the pen and a sticky note, or sometimes I plug it into my phone and I set an alarm for it to remind me like right before I'm about to pick up the kiddos. So then on my way to grab them, I'm reminded that I need to grab a couple things from the store, and I'm able to do that right away. And at least, like you mentioned, it kind of gets it out of your head. And now there's not this pressure I'm putting on my poor little brain to kind of remember this all the time. And it does give a sense of relief. I also really like the grounding method that you mentioned, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. Is also my go-to. For folks who don't know what that is, it's using your senses to be aware of your surroundings. And so you name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And it really does help to kind of bring you into your environment, bring more of that awareness, because sometimes we can be so into our heads, into our brain, into like our thoughts, that we just kind of give it a little bit of that mental break of being like, wait a second, I'm in my dining room. There's these things around me, and just kind of being able to ground us in that way.
Well, I find too that like there are a lot of times where I'm so in my head that I'm actually not even aware that am I even comfortable in the position I'm sitting in?
Yeah.
Am I hungry? Like, am I thirsty? And so, and with grounding and taking that mental break, it almost is like we're trying to give ourselves that permission where it can be really hard to let go of that struggle of wanting to keep tabs on things. And so it is a skill. Trying to ground yourself and practice that mindfulness is skill building. So to go from being in your head all the time to now magically being able to be engaged more mindfully for like 20, 30 minutes, that takes a lot of work. And
It
a lot of
does.
practice to get to that point.
Yeah.
So one technique that I also like too, to go a bit more on the therapeutic side, is a technique called cognitive diffusion, of just trying to see our thoughts from a non-judgmental place. Because a lot of times when we're stuck in our head, we can get so caught up in the thoughts and the content of what we're hearing and thinking that it can actually add a lot of like emotional struggles. And so we can acknowledge, okay, I'm having this thought about what's going on, and seeing it passively without engaging in it. I found that has been really helpful for me with almost engaging with my brain, but almost in a more restful state of not getting caught up in the noise of it.
It's more of the observation instead of the allowing it to really seep into everything else, right? Because then our emotions are going to be impacted. Like physically, it can, have an impact on it. And so, yeah, I really like that. Would we count reading as mental rest? Because I feel like reading does help me kind of get into a story and it out of like my list of things to do, because my brain is distracted by this wonderful story that I'm reading.
It's hard. 'Cause I think we hit like this gray area of distraction versus relaxation,
Yeah.
and knowing like, because we need both.
Yeah.
We need both in our lives. And so I think distraction can be a really good way to lead slowly into relaxation, where if we're able to read and we can like, take a pause when we flip the page, we're not like bombarded with all those like anxious thoughts again. That can be a really good way of practicing that mindfulness and relaxation. And I think both are very helpful with rest. So like, so I was thinking like, reading or listening to podcasts or listening to music, those can also be like some mindfulness activities to an extent, but it's a little tricky in that spot.
Yeah, I can see that. Even music, depending on the kind of music you put on, it's going to elicit different kind of emotions and energy. So definitely. But yeah, like doing like taking those short moments of grounding, of just, I guess, awareness, can be really helpful. And needing, like, the importance of taking mental rest is so that you don't feel mentally fatigued. It's so that you can kind of, be focused and be able to, also create space for creativity. And so mental rest is important for that reason. And so it's just being able to identify when we are feeling a little bit overwhelmed from everything that's going on in our mind, with our thoughts, with how we're talking to ourselves in our minds, the lists we're creating, all of the things that we're doing, and then being able to, again, engage in some of those activities that are going to help, just so that we are able to kind of, focus on having that rest, because it is going to benefit us in different ways.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I think those signs and cues, like you mentioned, just if we feel like we're stuck in our head, we're not aware at all of the present moment fairly often. I think those are some of the good cues. That's like, okay, maybe I need to slow down and check in with my body and with what's going on around me.
Yeah. And we were speaking a little bit about how mentally, depending on the things that we're thinking about, the way that we are kind of trying to process information, or the tasks that we have to do on a day-to-day basis, and the planning that follows that, can also impact our bodies physically, like increase our heart rate. It can, maybe we get a headache or we feel really physically overwhelmed, but that is an indicator that our emotions are now being impacted, right? That we're feeling a little bit anxious about all of the things that we have to do, about all the tasks, about what we have to do after this meeting. I have to go and get the kids and do this and do that. And so it can really bring up a lot of our emotional responses at the same time. And this is important because we also need to engage in emotional rest. And so what are some indicators that we are maybe needing to kind of rest more emotionally?
Sometimes that can be like kind of like what you're mentioning, right? Noticing those physiological symptoms or reactions, but noticing if we're having more of those uncomfortable emotions coming up, where if am I less patient and more quick to anger and
Mhm.
frustration? Am I noticing that like emotions are harder to manage right now, or feeling much bigger than typical? And so this can look like, if we're also around people that can be more emotionally taxing,
Mhm.
or if we do engage in people pleasing. As a person who is definitely has been working through people pleasing behavior, that takes a lot emotionally to be present for someone else. And
Yeah.
so I think what I like about emotional rest is recognizing when we're at our limit of providing that emotional care for other people, and where we're feeling, especially like we can notice it through resentment. If I'm
Mm.
starting to resent having to listen to this person and show up for this person, whatever that means or looks like.
Or I'm
And
feeling
so
emotionally drained when I'm in this environment. Yeah.
exactly. And so what I like about emotional rest is this idea of it gives us permission to be authentically yourself, of recognizing,
Mm.
hey, I need to take I need to step away or take a break from this, but
Mhm.
also I need to communicate authentically how I'm feeling. And hopefully with people who are supportive and trusting, who can handle our emotions and create that safe space for us to feel it and acknowledge it without judgment. And that can
Mm.
really help us feel more recharged and seen, and bring down the intensity of those feelings.
Yeah. It's funny when we think about rest, we think of omitting something, like taking something out. But when it comes to emotional rest, it means allowing yourself to actually feel and express your emotions, which is, again, when we think about rest, we're like, I'm going to do nothing. But no, I think our
Mhm.
emotions really need to be seen. And I think being able to acknowledge how we are feeling and the emotions that are coming up for us is a form of us giving or having that emotional rest.
Yes, yeah. I think all different types of rest that we're talking about is that combination of things that we want to reduce or limit, and then things maybe we want to add or do
Yeah.
differently here. But yeah, with emotional rest, some go tos like talking to a trusted friend or
Mhm.
about how we're feeling, journaling again if we want to express our emotions, having a good cry. Like
Yeah.
I
Oh,
know for me, so cathartic at
yes,
times.
I have a sad girl playlist on my
Yeah.
Spotify. Like I sometimes I can feel that blockage. Like I know I need to cry, but something is getting in the way of me being able to kind of release this. So my sad girl
Yep.
playlist, turn that on, get
I
get things going and moving and
Yep.
yeah.
I have my movie scenes. I have different scenes from movies. I'll just watch that clip, and that's
Yeah,
enough to help activate, and just helping to release that. So a few
exactly.
different activities to engage in, but also in terms of omitting, almost like can we set any temporary boundaries in terms of emotionally caring for other people? Of like if
Yeah.
friends are wanting to connect or chat, be like, I'm sorry today I don't have the capacity, but I'm happy to connect at a later time.
And the boundary too, like you mentioned before, of, removing ourselves from emotionally draining situations. And that is a boundary that we are placing, like thanks family, I really want to engage in this, upcoming, I don't know, family dinner,
Mhm.
but all of the communication around it is causing me to feel really overwhelmed. And so tell me what I need to make, and then I will, just kind of sit back and not
Yeah.
engage in the back and forth. And so it is kind of finding those moments where we can be honest with ourselves about how we are feeling, express
Yes.
our emotions in a healthy way that feels good for us and feels, comfortably uncomfortable or
Yeah.
whatever for us, but
Yeah.
also being able to set those limits. And I guess also bring awareness to what are some of those limits that do emotionally drain us, and how can we take a little bit of a step back. And it does, like you said, it doesn't have to be forever, it could be temporary.
Mhm. Yeah. So with emotional rest, this one can be tricky depending on our own knowledge of ourselves and
Yeah.
where our emotions lie. And also feeling like we're able to communicate our emotions in a safe space with trusted people. Because I feel like that really honors the process.
Hmm.
Whereas if I'm with people who are so used to me listening and providing and giving to them, may not be receptive to you giving, like asking for like, I need a rest right now from this.
Yeah.
So it is being an advocate for yourself when you're noticing that, like, I am feeling emotionally drained right now. And again, giving that permission. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to take rest and focus on
Hmm.
yourself emotionally.
I'm gonna just quickly put in here as a parent, sometimes taking that emotional rest is necessary so that we are able to show up for our family in a way that we feel good about, right? Like I know for myself, when I'm feeling overwhelmed and like, sensory overwhelmed, which we will talk about in a little bit. But when I'm feeling like this sense of overwhelm, I'm feeling, just the rush of the day. I'm feeling maybe a little bit more irritable because of the overwhelm I'm feeling and the list of things that I have to do. That is again like a moment where I can kind of try to set that limit of being like, things feel really overwhelming right now. Like, let's lower the volume down. Let me go and take a little bit of a break, and I can process exactly how it is that I'm feeling. Maybe I'm feeling frustrated. Maybe I'm feeling like I'm not being enough for my kiddos in that moment. Maybe I'm dealing with a lot of other emotions, but it's important for us as parents to be able to be aware of that, give ourselves a little break, be honest and validating about how we are feeling in a way that doesn't come with judgment, that just comes with that more of a compassionate awareness. And that again can show up in afterwards, after we give ourselves that moment, we are able to maybe be more patient with our kids or communicate things differently. And so it can really lead to that, better, like having better relationships, having, more emotional intelligence of how to handle different situations after the fact. And so I think, as a mom, it's really important to give ourselves permission to take that emotional rest.
Yeah, and it also models and teaches to
Yeah.
kids that it's okay to take like a 5 minute breather, and even going into like that co-regulation. Because I know for a lot of parents, if they're feeling overwhelmed emotionally, there's a good chance that kiddos might also have some big emotions too.
Exactly.
So it's almost like, hey, let's both engage in some rest right now. Let's do some deep breathing. Let's maybe
Yeah.
both take 5 minutes to ourselves and just, collect ourselves in different ways that we need, and then come back. And I think that's a beautiful way of both parent and child to recognize that their emotional needs matter, to strengthen that emotional intelligence. And what am I feeling? What do I need?
Yeah.
And then once we're more calm, be able to connect again more. So I love that you brought up the parenting aspect, because that is huge. I think being a parent, half the job is just managing your own emotions.
Yes. Yeah. Like you can't calm your kiddo down if you are also not regulated, right? And so being able to take that mental rest for sure. But as I mentioned in that, right? Like a lot of the times it's the environment that can create that feeling of overwhelm. Like I find myself really getting like that sensory overload when like the TV is on, my husband is on a work call in the living room, and they're like playing with a toy that has some sound to it. And I'm just like, and like my other son's trying to talk to me. I'm like, there's too much noise. I cannot focus. This feels like I'm getting kind of boxed in. Someone needs to stop doing what they're doing just so I can listen to my son. And sometimes that's also me popping in headphones and telling folks like, hey, while I'm making dinner, I have my headphones on. If you guys need me, come and tap me or whatever. And that at least allows me to just have one sound to focus on.
Yeah.
And so this is like the importance of taking that sensory rest. And so what is sensory stimulation for folks who maybe that's a new word for them?
Well, I think you described it really well. It is being overwhelmed with our senses in our environment. And I think one of the ones that you demonstrated really well was sound. How sound can be a stimulus that can be very overwhelming if there's a lot going on simultaneously and for long periods of time. I noticed that I'm also sensitive to sound in that way. As a kid, fireworks, like that's very loud and overstimulating for me. And so, yeah, noticing that when we're over, and this can also include smells, going down the perfume aisle in like different stores.
Oh,
They still
yeah.
do that now. Different textures. I know for some folks, they can't wear long sleeves or socks or certain or certain fabrics they can't do. Like of other sensories, sometimes lights, going into different stores and like the bright lights can all be very overwhelming, and we can notice again those physiological responses.
Sorry, for sight, there's also too many colors, too many things all at once. Can be a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, sorry, I just needed to add
No,
that.
that's a great example too, right? Of like if you go into certain areas and it's like the patterns in the wall and the floor and everything can
Mhm.
be very distracting and a lot
Mhm.
for our brains to process. So if we go into an environment, again, like a store where there's bright lights, colors of patterns everywhere, music blasting, kids running around, and we're walking through the perfume aisle, like that's a lot for our body to try to process.
Yeah.
What's all the information we're encountering in our environment? And that can lead to feeling a bit panicky or anxious, heart rate
Mhm.
escalating. So it's good to be aware, okay, there's probably a lot going on that I need to help reduce some of the senses. So, like you mentioned, putting earphones in to help reduce sound. Like, there's
Mhm.
some really good headphones out there that are noise canceling. Ones you
Yeah.
can even like sleep on your side. So I think that's a very common one I hear from folks. Can we
Mhm.
reduce sound in that way? Or having like a calming playlist. Some other ones that I hear, even just like closing your eyes, taking a break from the visuals that you see,
Yeah.
or if we're in a controlled room, can we dim the lights down?
Mhm.
For some of my clients, we would intentionally turn off the lights in session or dim them down so it's easier to feel more relaxed
Yeah.
in that way. As well as like, we can have then the opposite of what are some senses that we want to introduce that are more soothing. So for some folks, they might have smells that are really relaxing, like lighting that candle.
Mhm.
That can be good to feel grounded, or also textures. Like for me, I love like a specific cozy sweater or like my fluffy socks. Those are
Yeah.
things that for me, if I wear them, I feel more relaxed. Or even also using like a weighted blanket or something.
Mhm.
Those sensory elements can help soothe the body, soothe like the nervous system, and help us engage more in a restful state.
And bringing back co-regulation, sometimes I have to ask my partner, I need a huge bear hug, like squish me tight, because it's similar to a weighted blanket, right? Sometimes we need the added pressure on our bodies in some way to kind of feel that sense of comfort and release. And I think also enjoying nature, because
Mm.
that going to a place where it is a little like, you're in nature, you're not hearing all the sounds of the city. You're able to kind of really ground yourself and focus in on the sounds that nature has. And so, hearing the trees, the wind,
Mhm.
having the sunshine on your face. I'm imagining summer right now because
Oh
it's
my
cold and
gosh.
there's so much snow. So visually,
I
I'm in the summertime.
I miss the sound of birds.
Yeah.
Birds like singing and chirping in the morning, like that's something I really missed in the wintertime. Because that's
Yeah.
very, yeah, it's very connected to that, very relaxing. So like I love that you mentioned nature as a way.
Mhm.
And I think there was like some research coming out more about how looking at plants and trees and such actually does impact like the hormones in the brain and help us feel more relaxed.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, sweet, this is another thing to enable my plant addiction. So
Perfect.
I can just buy more
I need
plants.
all the plants.
And just sit there and stare at them, which honestly I do sometimes because I find it very
Yeah.
relaxing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I get a lot of migraines, and sometimes they are very sensory. And so, going into a dark, quiet room, kind of just
Mhm.
bringing that quietness and stillness to all of these things, like all of our senses, can help in whatever way works for us. Like you mentioned, weighted blanket, smells, different sounds. Some people really like sound machines.
Mhm.
And so, that can be really soothing for them. And so, yeah, just trying to focus in on what do you need around you to kind of feel more sensory sound.
Yeah, and that connection with the emotions, like you're saying, right? How when we
Hmm.
need to regulate, sometimes we have to change the sensories variables in our environment to be more emotionally relaxed. So those two are kind of interconnected in that way.
Yeah.
And I think also too, like kind of like smoothing into like the next another type of rest. I think with the emotional and sensory, we can also have that social. So social rest is another important one. I think that can be really helpful to be mindful of.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about social rest, Yvonne.
Well, I think we talked a little bit about it during emotional rest when we mentioned setting boundaries around, in environments or, certain people or community that are maybe we're feeling a little bit more emotionally drained in. And I think that can be a moment where we are kind of recognizing that what is it about this environment that I'm feeling the drain from? Is it that I feel this strong, expectation to show up a certain way? And so then that social interaction can just become really overwhelming. And so social rest involves having people around us that we can feel authentic with, that we feel comfortable with, that we feel supported by, and kind of, creating space and boundaries from relationships that maybe are the opposite of that, that maybe we do feel more drained or stressful in, or at least finding things to protect ourselves if we are having to engage in those relationships. And so I think that can also apply to creating more fulfilling relationships when we are able to have a little bit of that distance from them, have a little bit of that solo individual time. So then I have more of an energy to engage socially with my group.
Yeah, and kind of just jumping exactly with what you're saying. Like, I'm looking at the introverts and extroverts out there because everyone's version of social rest looks different. For a lot of the introverts, where for them, they expend energy when they're engaging socially. For them, they need a break from social interactions to feel recharged, right?
Yeah.
And then we have our extroverts who like they need social connection and engagement to feel recharged. So for them, it's like I need to have connection time with folks. I need to make phone calls. I need to see people in person, what have you, to feel more recharged. I know when COVID hit and all that isolation, I think a lot of the extroverts suffered because of the difficulty of connecting in person, and led to a lot more, creative online means of connection. But so a lot of it is like you're mentioning, engaging meaningfully with what feels right for us. But for the introverts, that just might mean a lot. They might need a lot more social recharge in between interactions, and then the extroverts might need a lot more social connection to feel recharged.
And the type of social connection one is needing, because if you have a diverse group of friends, it could be that, you are wanting the connection of certain folks that maybe you enjoy playing video games with, or who you have that similar interest in, the friendships that maybe require more intellectual conversations or thinking. Those may be the relationships that you need a rest from just for that moment. And so again, for those who really are requiring or needing that social engagement for like feeling recharged, it's also just being mindful of what kind of social need am I having right now? What kind of ways am I wanting to socialize? What capacity do I have to socialize with certain people? And then, initiating that kind of connection.
Yeah, no, exactly. I like that you brought that up because I was going to bring that up too. Like, there's some folks where it's light and it's just we're going to like play video games or do this activity together, and then there's some folks who have those deep, meaningful life question exploration conversations, right? Where depending on our capacity, that might be what we need over the other. So good. A lot of it seems to be just being aware of our needs, learning more about what is it this time that I need right now, and then if we can, trying to initiate that.
We talked a little bit about physical, social, mental, emotional, and sensory rest. And I think one that we don't really talk too much about is creative rest. So what is creative rest? I feel like you're a very creative person. You love to do your crocheting, and, just I think playing video games also requires a certain level of creativity that I don't have. But what is creative rest?
Creative rest is funny. It's can be really helpful for people who are engaging a lot of problem solving, like brainstorming new ideas, getting in touch with those different that creative, trying to create new things. And so this can be a way of like, again, taking a break. If we're doing a lot of problem solving with our work or with navigating things, taking a break from being the person to problem solve can be really helpful. For other people, it can be like we can become cynical and exhausted. And so it's almost like, how can we reawaken this awe and wonder in us about the creativity around us in the world? And so for some folks, this can be, I know we've brought nature a few times, but appreciating the beauty of nature can be really helpful with us feeling like we're connected to something. And again, allowing our brains to like just take a break from problem solving, focusing in that way. Similar a bit to like the mental rest. But get ourselves carried into like that sense of awe and wonder and things around us. So yeah, being around nature, looking at waterfalls, going to the Grand Canyon. I know these are very like, travel-esque items.
I think too, we hear and we see a lot about this, like, writer's block or, other forms of creation like art and music and, writing and all of these different things. And we hear a lot about, people needing to take that creative rest. Like they maybe hit a block in whatever the thing is that they're creating. And a lot of the times I have seen, especially in like movies and stuff, like, or in interviews, we hear, I had to take a little bit of a creative break from this. And during that break, I was able to make space for new ideas or new thoughts, new strategies on how to like piece the story together. And in one of my favorite shows, New Girl, Jess goes on a creativity walk when she's trying to plan Cece's bridal dress and what to do with it. But going out and just exploring the world, I think I'm gonna, this is coming from a source, but I can't name the source. But I did watch an interview where it was a screenwriter was talking about, writing the story, kind of hitting that block in a road and taking a step back and being able to be out and, through observation of other people watching and like seeing other relationships, it really allowed him to, all of a sudden get hit with this creativity boost of how he could carry on the story. And so I think taking a step back is really important and being aware of when we are hitting that block. And it doesn't have to be this huge, creative piece that we are putting. It can be creativity too. And like you mentioned, like our work, thinking about things a little bit differently and, how we want to approach situations. So maybe sometimes we have had to be a little bit more creative in those places. And so it's how can we apply a rest in while I'm doing this creative piece of work?
Yeah, it makes me think that also the show Parks and Recreation, where the main character, she's run out of ideas of what to do and part of her job, and so she takes her and the department camping as a way to help have a break from their environment and try to collaborate together on new ideas. And the irony is that she needs to stop thinking about creating new ideas and rest, and that actually helps bring back the recharge. So it's like the theme that we're hearing is taking a step away from different areas of trying to solve or figure out issues and observing, appreciating, and then coming back.
Yeah. So engaging with beauty in the world, nature, music, movies, books, shows, anything that kind of just gives you a little bit of a distance between the thing that you are needing to be creative about. And like we talked about, new ideas, problem solving, even just a moment of joy of just like being in that beauty of the world. It can kind of, give you that recharge.
Yeah, I think that's where video games come in for me too.
Yeah. So much creativity in video games. My God.
Oh my gosh. Especially with kiddos in Minecraft. Like, you let them run wild and...
It's a whole new world, that Minecraft. Yeah.
So yeah, those are some different ways in terms of ways that we can engage in creative rest. And I think the last one is not one that many people are familiar with, but something known as spiritual rest. Rest for us to engage more spiritually. Yvonne, do you want to share a little bit about what that means or your interpretation of it?
Yeah, so I think spiritual rest is like finding purpose beyond our regular day-to-day. And so if we, are connected to something greater than ourselves, whether it's religion or more spiritual towards a higher power, doing things that kind of help you connect to that in some way. So this could be done through prayer, meditation, like being involved in like volunteering in a community or at a church. Yeah, kind of just, I guess, feeling a sense of calmness from this connection that we have with this higher power and ways that we can connect in that way that makes us feel.
Yeah, sometimes it can feel like we're connected to something greater beyond ourselves.
Yes.
In a way, whether that is with connecting with other humans. I think one approach is connecting to other people, connecting to God, connecting to nature, connecting to animals, connecting to ourselves. I think those can all be different ways to feel that sense of purpose or meaning, something that we can have a greater sense of appreciation for or feeling acceptance with. So, another thing you were saying too, it makes me think of going for a walk in nature too, can also be a way of feeling connected to things outside of ourselves, which, just side note, makes me think, for all types of rest, just go for a walk in nature. It's like that.
Yes.
Get all the boxes there.
That seems to be the thing, the common theme within all these rests. Yeah.
But when I do bring this up with clients, I think that in Western culture, we've taken out the mystery and this enjoyment of the spiritual rest, and this can seem a bit foreign. And so I think it's nice to reflect on, what does this mean for you personally? Because everyone's
Yeah.
idea of spiritual rest is going to be different, and doesn't mean just religious, like engaging in like a religious practice. It can mean other things of connection. And I think especially, I'm going to bring up COVID again. Like there's a lot of disconnection with people and feeling isolated and separated. And so for them, like they can lose that sense of feeling seen or heard or that appreciation. And so how can we help find ways to feel that connected to other people or feeling seen and heard? That can be really helpful and recharge us.
Yeah, and with that sense of community, that's where the involvement can come in, right? Through volunteering, through connecting in like a reading circle or in any kind of other, thing that involves community, and that sense of spirituality. And so I really like that. And for some, it could even be like the practice of, yoga or meditation can really help us connect with ourselves. And through that connecting with ourselves, we're also connecting with, the whatever it is that we believe in, and with this like sense of a higher power. And so it can be really, kind of bringing the attention and the focus back to this connection in whatever way that could be, with other individuals, with nature, with God. It can be, just kind of feeling that comfort of that connection.
And I find people too find that animals can be a really unique source of that, where, we don't speak the same language, but we can still feel seen and heard with each other, and caring or fostering for something outside of ourselves. So again, plants, like having, feeling like we have purpose in a way and give us that sense of meaning. And I think that helps us to feel more energetic and motivated to do other tasks that might seem a little bit more trivial in that way, knowing that there is something more beyond it. And so, like I think you did a good job of summarizing some different ideas and ways to do that.
Yeah, and I think with pets too, like even though we don't speak the same language, there's so much care and attention, and they just know when something is off. My husband had knee surgery, and our cat Loki has been all over him, and we have to he has to be careful. Sometimes he jumps on him, but he knows something's up, and so he's really kind of Loki's been a little bit more close to my husband when usually he's a lot closer to my son. And so animals can sense this. We see videos on social media so often of animals being so gentle with a newborn, or being close to somebody who maybe has an illness. And so that's why there's support animals and all of that. Anyway, little blab about pets. But
I mean, any excuse to talk about my cats. When my spouse and I were sick a few weeks ago, and just completely just knocked out, I had the cats with me basically at all times. We joked around, had they have the two doctors, where they just slept by our side the entire time, because they knew that we weren't doing our usual routine, that we were off. And just again, there's not that shared language of communication, but they understood, and just sensing that, and that sense of community with our pets even. That can just feel so loving. And again, well, animals, that they're not judgmental, right? They don't love you based off the way you look or how smart you are. They just care about you. And so I find they can be really healing and recharging, not just spiritually, but emotionally, them showing up for us. I've heard so many times from people, they're upset and their dog or their cat came to them, and we're trying to help soothe them through it. So it's, again, going for walks in nature and pets seem to be some great ways overall to recharge.
Yeah, that's the theme that we are kind of leaning towards, but it definitely does, for sure. So I think one thing that you mentioned at the beginning was being patient with ourselves while we are trying to incorporate these types of rests into our lives. It's new, it's brand new. It's something that we may not have applied before. And I think even for me, and I've been in this field for a long time, it can be difficult for me to kind of catch myself and be like, ooh, man, I'm like overthinking a lot of things here. So I need to take a little bit of a mental and emotional break. Like, it is important for us to kind of be patient, be compassionate with ourselves while we are trying to incorporate these types of rests into our lives. And I think the other thing is starting small. Sometimes we're so excited and we're like, yeah, we're going to do all this rest. And we might jump too quickly into too many things all at once. So I think it's important to just slowly start introducing some small moments of rest in your day. See how that feels. Some may hit and some may be a miss. And just kind of trying to have this moment be kind of more of exploring what kind of rest do I enjoy? What kind of mood am I in when I engage in different types of rest within these different types of rest, right? Maybe going for a walk in nature in the winter time isn't something that makes me feel good, but in the spring, summer, or fall, it's something I gravitate towards. Maybe the sound of birds is something I miss so strongly. Is there a way that I can get that sound? Maybe nature sounds on a speaker or on my headphones, just to give me that reminder that the birds are going to be coming back soon, right? Like, all of these like little ways to slowly incorporate this, like these new things into your day.
And adding to that too, like what for us could have been deemed restful in the past, that can change and evolve for us over time as we get older and how things shift. And so being compassionate, like you said, towards yourself, where if,
Yeah.
last year during this time, this was the type of rest I needed, and knowing that it might not serve me at this point now, and that's okay. And just
Yeah.
trying to, if we're allowing ourselves to be creative and try some new things to see if that's the kind of rest we need at this time, and knowing
Yeah.
that it's a constant change and progress, and that's okay.
And being intentional with our rest too. And I know it's hard to schedule things. Like, sometimes living too much into your schedule can be really tough, but sometimes it is just scheduling time for rest. Book it in, put it in your calendar, note it as rest. And so when you get that reminder of, hey, you should be resting right now, or this is a good time to rest, you're being intentional about the type of rest that you are needing in that moment. And so you can then practice what it is that works for you in that moment to kind of give you that rest.
Yeah, my partner's really good to help remind me when I am busy scheduling in social activities and activities. He's just like, "Have you booked time off for you though? Like, have you made a
Yeah.
date with yourself?" And so I've kind of gone to this new year of like, Sundays are mine. Sundays are my day to engage whatever rest I need to help with navigating into the next week. And so whatever works for your lifestyle, if you can invite space if possible, because I know it's not easy depending on lifestyles. Being mindful, being aware of what we need, and having fun with playing around with different things to find what
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one thing after you do the rest, have a little bit of a moment of reflection to see, how do I feel after this? Because I think when we're able to notice the benefits of rest and we're able to have that clarity of, ooh, this really like shifted my energy levels, we can really continue to add that into our day and continue to schedule it in because we're seeing the benefits. So give yourself that little like moment of check-in, like, okay, I had my 15 minutes of rest, or however long it is. Maybe you could only do 5. I had my 5 minutes of rest. How am I feeling now? Am I feeling more energized? Am I feeling more ready to take on whatever the thing is that I have next?
Yeah.
Do I feel more calm, more centered, more grounded? And yeah, just kind of being able to do that quick little check-in.
No, and I love that. And can we do those check-ins even throughout the day? Going back to the
Yeah.
idea of just doing, can we do like a 5-minute break throughout our day, every few hours and such, just to help check in? How are we doing? Anything need a bit more extra attention right now? And if so, can I provide that for myself at some point?
Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel is important for us to check in on as
But
we
there's
close up this conversation about rest?
oh, there's probably things I am forgetting and other points that could be helpful.
Yeah.
But I think that we did a good job of kind of exploring the different types here and looking at what are some concrete, hopefully more tangible ways of inviting it into our life. And again, the themes of just being compassionate, checking in, learning more about what we need, and knowing that this can just be a journey of figuring it all out. So, no.
Yeah.
How about you? Anything else you think we should add?
I'm just going to add patience
Mm, mhm.
to the list of words you were just naming because I think we can be really eager to jump into rest, and we're so excited about it. And then we can get really, deflated when we feel like we are not benefiting from the rest. And a lot of the time it's because we aren't being patient. We're not being present in the moment. We're already thinking of, oh my God, after these 15 minutes, I'm going to feel so well rested. And then in those 15 minutes, you're thinking about how well rested you're going to be after and what you can do now that you feel well rested. So you're not actually resting. So really be patient with yourself. Try to find those moments to just be present. Also, be present in nature, be present in listening to your song, be present in doing the activity you're doing for physical rest. And that can also sometimes help. So like, again, just to bring up the grounding exercise we discussed earlier, that can be a really helpful way to just bring yourself into the place, the physical environment that you're in. And then from there, you can go into like, okay, well, now I'm just going to be present in sitting on this chair and doing this activity. So yeah, patience and being present.
Which, patience is, life keeps trying to teach me patience. And I'm thinking one day I'll learn it. Embrace that. But no, I like that you brought that up. I think that's really important in this journey of trying to recharge and be kind to ourselves.
Yeah. And as we're inching closer to springtime, hopefully there is some opportunity, for doing the big theme, which was nature, like being able to be in nature. But yeah, like schedule it in. You deserve that rest. Thank you so much for talking about this. And thanks everyone for listening in. Hopefully you're able to kind of practice some of these things in your life, and we will catch up with you next time. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.